Hey, I want to just keep this kind of big idea out in front of us as a church community. We have Alpha coming up to start the new year in January. Alpha is an amazing opportunity to explore the basics of Christian faith. That could be something that you want to do because you grew up in church and you don't feel like you totally get the basics, or you want to loop it again in some way. It could be because you're exploring faith. It could be because you have a friend who you think would be interested in exploring faith and you want to take them along with you. There's really so many good reasons to try Alpha. And for us, it starts on Wednesday in January. We've got childcare covered. We've got food covered. It's going to be an amazing environment inside of our auditorium, while we also have our Wednesday night midweek also going on with our kids stuff and all of that. So that's looming in front of us in a great way, kind of like an amazing vacation that's out in front of us. As we kind of go backward and plan on that, we have all these amazing opportunities for connection in our community and for invitation in our community in the month of December. And so we'd love it if you invited people to our Sunday services, invited them to our Christmas party, invited them to our movie night in December. And then if you go even further back into right now, the month of November, we are kind of challenging each other to pray. Pray for people who don't know Jesus in your life. Pray that God would bring people in your life who don't know Jesus. Pray that you would have an opportunity to tell them about your faith. One of the things I've been brainstorming is just like, if somebody asked me if I had, what I did this weekend, I would say, hey, the band at my church played one of my favorite songs. Now, I wouldn't say that if it wasn't true, but if it was, and I would say, that happened. Or, we had this speaker and they said this idea and it really stuck with me. To just be increasingly proud of your association with Jesus and your association with Jesus through Mercy Hill. So that's kind of what's coming. And if I said, what's the vision to kind of poke you at right now in this season, it's just that idea of being proud of your association with Jesus. It talks about acknowledging Jesus before people and Jesus acknowledging us before God. That's a key idea that I read about this summer in the Bible that has just kind of rung in my ear, and just wanting to be somebody who acknowledges Jesus and trusting that means something for my life, deep into my heart, and kind of long into my future, and how God might use that. On Sunday, I talked about Philippians chapter 4, verses 8 and 9. I cheated a little bit and talked about verses 6 and 7 too, because there's this relationship between verse 9 and verse 7 when it comes to peace. It talks about how prayer brings peace in verse 7, and then how it talks about how we can experience the God of peace in verse 9, and kind of the relationship of that. And so kind of went back through Philippians chapter 4, verses 6 and 7, and talked about prayer and petition and thanksgiving, and how God wants to use prayer in order to remind us that he's with us and to give us peace. And then we talked about how in verse 8 of Philippians chapter 4, Paul goes through this long list of things that are good, things that are godly, things that are worth thinking about. And then he talks about emulating him. And so there's this link between what we think about and how we behave. And Paul is kind of saying, like, the way that I think motivates the way that I act, and I would encourage you to act like me. And one of the things I've been thinking about as a parent, one of the things I've been thinking about as a leader in a Christian context is, can I be someone where I say, act like me, talk like me, walk like me, make the decisions that I make? And increasingly want to be that in all of these different areas of my life. And I challenge you to think about that. You have spaces in your life where you are a leader, where you are an influencer. And I would encourage you to consider, like, what would it look like for me to kind of raise my hand and say, I think you should be like me. And if you don't feel like you could do that, God wants to help you get to that spot. But it's going to start, if we go back to Philippians chapter 4, verse 8, with what's going on in your head. And I might go even further back to consider the words of Jesus and to say that it's not just about what goes into your head, but it's what goes into your eyes that makes things happen in your head and then comes out in the way that you live your life. The Bible talks about how out of the overflow of our heart, our mouth speaks, and it talks about how our eyes are a lamp to our body, or into our mind and into our heart. And so just thinking about our thinking, but even before that, thinking about our inputs, right? So that kind of, what are you looking at? What are you listening to? What are you reading? What would it look like to pull something out and put something else in its place? What would it look like to stop? What if we just all said, hey, there might be something that I watch on Netflix that I just have to stop and say, this isn't consistent with my values. There's so many times where I'm just like kind of a completist, where I'm like, well, I started it, so I'm going to finish. One of the most embarrassing stories of my life was we were watching a movie, and I didn't even like the movie. I can't even remember what the movie was, but my parents were like, we're leaving the theater. And I was like, what are we doing? I'm like 12 years old, 14 years old. I was like, how can we leave the theater? But they were just even at that point going like, okay, this isn't what we thought it was going to be, and we don't want to continue to walk down this road. What would it look like for us to be people like that, who said, what we put into our eyes matters, what we put into our ears matters, how we think about things matters. We want to be people who think about good things, because we know that that will lead to joy. We know that that will show up in the way that we live our lives. And when we live our lives that way, we want to be proud to be able to say like, hey, follow me as I follow Christ. Look at the way that I live and live the way that I live.